A storybook is an important resource that will help develop literacy skills within young learners. This story, called Maggie's Story, involves a lot of repetition and use of context to facilitate meaning. To teach this story, I would start by introducing the book and obviously telling the kids what the story would be about, showing them some of the pictures first, and then just reading through the story on my own as a read aloud at the same speed, allowing students to just kind of listen and understand the story and then go through it afterwards. So, Maggie's Story. That's a bird. It's green. That's a butterfly. It's red. That's a fish. It's blue. That's a crab. It's yellow. That's a cat. It's white. I'm an elephant and I'm gray. That's an elephant. It's super. I'm an elephant and I'm super. So after reading through the entire book, I would allow students to ask any questions, talk about the story. We'd talk about what the story is really about, how Maggie is talking about all the different colors that animals are, and how she is still gray, and how she's unhappy about it because on this page, when we flip back to that one, we can tell by her facial expression that she's sad, that she's gray. But then when she moves on to talking about a regular elephant, she's saying that it is awesome and that she ends up being happy. And then afterwards, I would leave the book in my classroom, allow students to go look at it, and they can read on their own. But then next week, I would bring this book back and redo the story. But this time I would not read it only by myself. I would have the students help me, and I would hope that by then at least a couple of them had looked at it again. I'd probably suggest it within that week as well for students to go do that if they got done with work early or any of the activities we did in class. So this one, I would read it and then let students help me with some of the words. So I would start it over again. I would say Maggie's Story. I would say that's and then allow the students to say bird when I would just point at the bird, and I would say it's, and they would say green. And I would say that's and they would say butterfly. It's red. And I would do that throughout the entire book as I would point to the animal and have them say it. I'd honestly probably start with just doing the animal and then do the colors, so then we could do that separately and then do it again with both if we had enough time for that, by being able to do both, because some students have a little harder remembering fish and blue, whereas if we'd work on the animals first and then the colors, or the colors first and then the animals, it might make the reading a little easier. I would also, if I could, give the students their own copy and tell them to follow along and then point to the words that we say as a class. So if we were doing the animals parts, I would say that's a fish, and I'd make sure the students all know to put their finger on the word fish as they say it. And then if students are pointing to the wrong words, I can sit with them as we do it as a class and then make sure that we're pointing together that that's the word we're talking about, fish. And so that they can really recognize that word as they're saying it, and then and associating it with the animal on the page. Then they can also read it by themselves. They would do that, and then we would go back from time to time, go over it, and then maybe even have students come up wanting to read it to the class themselves after having enough exposure to it. That is how we would work on some literacy skills with a storybook, just because of the repetition with the same, having the demonstrative that in there, as well as the vocabulary for animals and colors. And then the illustrations, they would see the meanings, and then also be able to see once we get to Maggie that she is sad, and so they can see the facial expressions, and then how that changes to being happy at the facial expression goes back to happy like it was at the beginning of the book. So this text, this story in its own can go over a lot of different things, especially that just having that repetition will really help with teaching of that teaching of oral language and speaking that out loud and making sure they make those connections between what they're speaking, the words on the page, and also the illustrations. And that's my example.